Our tale from Trench Crusade today takes us to the Rock of Gibraltar, where hell keeps the narrow gate between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. Weeks after Cassian Vey murdered his captain and took command of Dock 3, an easterly wind lays a white cloud across the summit. It should pass by evening. Instead, it remains until water turns bitter, powder turns to clay, and ships begin obeying lights that no living signalman has shown. This is not the story of how Cassian Vey captured a fortress. It is the story of what the fortress demanded once it belonged to him. There were 11,000 mouths in the district I inherited from Captain Aurelio Marwent. That was Mina's number. The official roll said 8,419, but official rolls did not count wretched laborers unless they died on a day when compensation was payable. They did not count prisoners used by the engine houses, children sleeping behind the slaughter vaults, deserters protected by foremen, or the families of artificers whose contracts described them as portable dependents. They counted artillery witches twice, once as women and once as weapons, which was the closest our ledgers came to honesty. 11,000 mouths, 3 factions claiming the same powder room, 2 lifts fit to carry shells, 1 condenser supplying half the lower yards, no ledger that had not been improved by theft. I learned these things at breakfast. When I had been a rivet runner, breakfast was black bread dipped in boiler water. When I became a trooper, it was black bread eaten while standing. Captain Marwent had breakfasted beneath a silver cover on the Admiralty steps, attended by a barber, a taster, and a prisoner whose tongue had been removed after commenting on the eggs. I kept the silver cover. I dismissed the barber. I gave the taster a rifle and put him on night watch, where he was less likely to poison me by incompetence. The tongueless prisoner stayed because he knew where Marwent had hidden the good coffee. On the 17th morning of my command, he poured water into my cup. The water was brown. A human tooth clicked against the porcelain. Darrow stared at it. "Officer issue?" he asked. "Only the tooth." Kiv lifted the cup, sniffed it, and held it to the light. He had healed crookedly after the old cistern flood. One shoulder sat higher than the other, and damp weather made him rub the ribs I had once cracked, saving him. He dipped a strip of polished iron into the water. It came out furred red. "Condenser 6, he said. "Piston lining." Mina did not look up from the ration abstracts. "Mammon owns the spare." "Mammon owns 3 spares, Kiv said. "Mammon owns 1 spare and 2 opportunities to sell us the wrong thing." Olt sat in the open window with his boots on the outer ledge. He ate olives one at a time and watched the cloud assembling above the eastern cliff. Olt had always preferred edges. During the Night of 5 Knives, he had occupied every place from which a sensible man might fall. Command had not improved him. The cloud was a white table laid across the rock's summit. Beneath it, the eastern face disappeared into vapor while the western harbor lay in hard morning sun. Gibraltar did that when the Levanter blew. Moist air came across the narrow sea, struck the limestone, climbed, cooled, and became cloud. The old pilots called the streaming banner over the crest the pennant. The Moloch adepts called it an atmospheric refraction of strategic significance. Dock workers called it the tablecloth and took washing indoors. The wind divided the fortress as sharply as any faction. On the east, cloud-soaked uniforms hid the Mediterranean and turned the cliff roads slick. On the west, the air descended warmer and drier over the town and naval yards, so a man could stand in sunlight while watching vapor pour across the ridge above him. Old gunners judged its strength by the plume. A small cap meant laundry weather. A long pennant meant ships should shorten tow lines, and a cloud spilling down to the batteries meant every signal must be confirmed by wire. Those rules predated hell. We kept them because weather does not care who conquered the manual. "It will burn off," I said. Olt spat an olive stone into the wind. It vanished upward. "Wind says no. Wind does not hold rank. Then it will be surprised by noon." Condenser 6 occupied an old casemate cut behind the king's lines, though no king had held Gibraltar for centuries. The machine was an Eligos improvement upon a Christian rain catchment. Iron ribs, salt traps, copper coils, and a piston large enough to bury a horse in. It drew moisture from air that seemed dry, which Mammon considered theft from the future, and taxed accordingly. Before the condensers, generations of garrisons had carved channels into roofs and slopes, leading every rare shower toward underground tanks. Catchments were scrubbed before rain because dust, gull filth, and powder soot could poison a season's supply. The first dirty flow was sent away, only then were sluices turned toward storage. Mammon preserved the practice but charged separately for the broom, the sluice, and the privilege of receiving water that had fallen free from heaven. Gibraltar remembered every siege in the shape of its plumbing. The piston lining had split. Every stroke scraped rust into the clean tank. Kiv showed me the tear with the reverence of a surgeon revealing a fatal wound. "We can sleeve it," he said. "For a day. Perhaps 2. And after? We become thirsty with excellent posture." Mammon's factor arrived before I sent for him. Greed always hears a leak. Factor Orson wore a green velvet coat despite the heat and little leather overshoes to protect his boots from our floor. He brought the spare lining in a lacquered case and a contract carried by 2 chained clerks. His price was 4,000 ducats, 6,000 liters of furnace oil, and permanent claim over every 7th cup produced by the repaired condenser. "You want us to buy our own water forever," I said. "Commander Vey, nothing is owned until it has been paid for repeatedly. Captain Marwent paid 200 ducats for the last lining. Captain Marwent enjoyed preferred rates. Captain Marwent is under the 3rd step outside. I buried him there the morning after Dock 3. You may negotiate with him." Orson smiled. Mammon men respected graves when graves possessed collateral. "The Levanter has delayed shipping. Scarcity alters value." I refused him. Pride required it. Pride is expensive, but not always foolish. Kiv made the sleeve from submarine-bearing metal. To soften it, he diverted steam from the western hoist. We cut drinking issue by 1 cup in 6 and told the men the brown tint came from fortifying minerals. Darrow drank his ration in front of the lower yard crews and showed his teeth afterward. The condenser began moving again. Clear water trickled into the test glass. Men cheered as if we had sunk a cruiser. Then bell 9 rang 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. Kiv went pale. "What?" "The western ammunition lift," he said. "Cage stopped between galleries. Then restart it. We used its steam." Every solution in Gibraltar created another emergency. The cleverness lay in choosing which failure we could survive. I looked at the clear water. I looked at the hoist indicator sinking toward red. Above us, the Levanter thickened until the summit vanished. It did not burn off by noon. The western ammunition lift had been cut through the limestone during the 19th century by Christian prisoners who believed Gibraltar might one day be liberated. Heretic engineers widened it, armored it, electrified the call bells, and retained the Christian habit of working men until they died. Progress is often tradition with improved gears. The cage had stopped 80 feet above the loading gallery and 60 below St. Sulphur Battery. Inside were 6 shells, 2 loaders, and artillery witch Elira Ven. The shells worried Kiv. The witch worried everyone else. Artillery witches understood the future in arcs. They saw where a bomb wished to fall and sang until it obeyed. Close confinement made them restless. Restless witches spoke of impacts that had not occurred, sometimes persuading those impacts to arrive early. Elira's voice came down the shaft through the emergency pipe. "Commander," she sang, "one fuse is sweating. The younger loader will strike the south wall 3 times before he dies. The older will bite through his tongue. You will lose your left hand at 11 minutes past the bell." I checked my watch. "Ask her whether that is local time," Darrow said. The cage's safety pawls had failed to catch. It hung from one cable, slowly paying out through a break, starved of steam pressure. Condensation fell inside the shaft like rain. Each drop that struck the cage made the witch laugh. "Secondary line?" I asked. Kiv pointed to a coil of hoisting cable on the service drum. "Enough to save the cage or enough to operate the lift for a month? Not both." "Save the shells," Lieutenant Sorel said behind me. No one had summoned him. Sorel had survived Marwent by standing aside at precisely the proper moment. He was polished where I was scarred, courtly where Darrow was blunt, and so patient that men mistook his waiting for loyalty. I had retained him because a commander who kills every possible rival soon commands only cowards. "The witch is worth more than the shells," I said. "Then save the witch. The loaders are not entered as specialists." Sorel never recommended cruelty. He merely removed the accounting arguments against it. I put on a climbing belt. Darrow objected. I reminded him that I had taken command less than a month before and could not yet delegate danger without appearing to delegate courage. That silenced him, which was not the same as convincing him. Olt descended first, barefoot because he trusted toes more than boots. The shaft wall sweated under our hands. Old cut marks showed where generations of prisoners had driven tools into limestone. In one recess, a Christian had scratched a cross. Someone later hammered horns onto it. Someone later still added a price. We reached the cage as the brake slipped another inch. Illyra sat upon the shells in a black veil, copper stitches glinting across her lips. The younger loader was hammering the south wall with a wrench. Once. "Stop him," I said. The older loader seized the wrench. Twice. The cage dropped half a foot. His jaw snapped shut. Blood ran from his mouth. "There!" Darrow called from above. "Prediction satisfied! Bring them up!" Witches dislike mockery because it competes with certainty. Illyra turned her veiled face toward him, and every shell in the cage clicked. We passed the rescue cable around a roof brace. There was no proper shackle, so Olt climbed beneath the cage and fed the line through the lower frame while it hung over darkness. I watched the minute hand approach 11 past, my left glove caught between cable and guide wheel. Illyra leaned close. "Hand," she whispered through copper. I cut the glove away with Marwent's old knife. The empty leather fingers went down the shaft. The knife had been silver once. His blood had stained the hinge black. I carried it not as a trophy, but as a reminder that a man may own the knife that killed his predecessor and still fail to understand what replaced him. At 11 minutes past, Kiev released the service drum. The rescue cable took the weight. The main line snapped. The cage fell 6 inches and stopped. The wrench slipped from the young loader's hand and struck the south wall a third time. No one died. Illyra laughed until copper cut her lips. We hauled them out through a maintenance door, one by one. The 6 shells remained in the cage. Sorel's face showed no disapproval. He simply wrote down the loss. Illyra refused to leave the gallery until she had shown Kiev the call mechanism. Its relay box had received an all-clear command immediately before the steam pressure fell. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. "That is not our sequence," I said. "It was," Kiev replied. "Before the dock enlargement, abolished 32 years ago." The brass key inside the relay had been moved by hand. There were no fresh tool marks. There was, however, a salt crust on the contacts, although the gallery lay hundreds of feet above the sea. "Someone knows old routines," Mina said when I brought her the key. "Or someone found an old manual," Sorel offered. "Where?" "Captain Marwent kept archives. Some burned during the reconciliation. Some did not. He allowed the possibility to sit between us. Perhaps my new command had inherited an enemy from the man I killed. Perhaps the enemy had inherited Sorel. I ordered guards on every obsolete bell panel and a full inventory of old signaling books. Olt asked whether I wanted him to climb the eastern galleries. The cloud had descended there until balconies disappeared 10 paces from their doors. "Not yet," I said. That was the first mistake I made because I was commander. As a trooper, I had trusted Olt to disappear. Command made his absence something I might have to explain. The next morning, the cloud remained. The clear tank tasted of iron again. 3 launches struck moorings they had used for years. Men in the East Barracks woke with water pooled beneath their beds. At ration bell, the meat convoy came in. Every carcass was green. Gibraltar ate by convoy. The Rock could make gun barrels, pressure hulls, infernal engines, shells, chains, and very convincing records. It could not make wheat. Its slopes were too steep, its soil too thin, and every patch that might have grown onions had acquired a battery, a cemetery, or a fee. Flour came by sea. Oil came by sea. Coal, salt, lemons, and the pale roots Beelzebub called potatoes came by sea. Meat came aboard black-hulled victualers with drainage holes in the decks. When the weather closed the harbor, Gibraltar began consuming its future. The convoy had left Ceuta before dawn. The carcasses were sound when Beelzebub sealed them. Their quartermaster produced a priest who swore to this while chewing something too small to identify. Yet when the first cart crossed the landport gate, green liquid ran from its boards. The beef had softened to the texture of wet cloth. Goat eyes bulged with white threads. In one barrel, salted tongues whispered the names of men passing nearby. Mina cut into a haunch. The flesh recoiled from her knife. "How long?" I asked. "For what?" "Before it kills whoever eats it. Before noon if we cook it. Before evening if we don't." The wretched had already smelled the officers' pantry. They knew preserved fruit remained behind the command kitchens. Hunger gives the lowest men remarkable intelligence. By second bell, 200 laborers crowded the ration yard. By third bell, there were 500 armed with hooks, riveting hammers, and lengths of track. Darrow placed blue-sashed troopers across the kitchen doors. "Warning volley. Into stone. Into knees. Stone doesn't learn." I refused. Not from mercy. 500 hungry laborers had wives, bunkmates, and work crews across the lower galleries. Kill 50, and we would have to kill 500 more before supper. A massacre is merely a debt with excellent publicity. Mina found me 12 tins of peaches in Marwent's reserve, 9 jars of lemons packed in salt, and a side of smoked pork bearing the private seal of a Beelzebub cardinal. "Put them on the officers' table," I said. "The crowd will tear it apart." "That is the idea." I ordered every officer of Dock 3 into the ration yard. Some came in dress coats, some sent excuses. Darrow returned with those men at rifle point, explaining that he had mistaken their excuses for pleas to be escorted safely. We laid the green meat on trestles. Steam from the cooking vats carried a smell of copper, sweet rot, and opened graves. The wretched pressed against the guard line. A bottle struck my shoulder. Someone shouted Marwent's name as if a dead tyrant had become a better alternative merely by being absent. I climbed onto the table and opened the smoked pork. The yard quieted. I cut it into 11 pieces. I gave one to each senior officer and threw the remainder into the crowd. Then I opened the fruit, poured it over the green ration, and filled my plate. "Commander," Kiv whispered. "Mina said—" I heard Mina. I ate. Rot carries different flavors depending on its ambition. This tasted of old coins and flowers left in corpse water. The meat tightened around my fork when I cut it. Around me the officers chewed. Lieutenant Sorrell swallowed without expression. One young ensign vomited onto his boots. Darrow made him scoop it up and finish. "There is no officer's ration," I told the yard. "There is Gibraltar's ration. Today it is bad. Tomorrow it will be less. If any man finds clean food hidden by my command, he may hang the officer who hid it." That was theater. Government requires theater because facts are usually too small to be seen from the back of a crowd. The laborers lowered their tools. Mina opened the reserve stores. We mixed the remaining good food into the vats, stretched grain with seaweed flour, and burned the worst carcasses under armed watch. No one rioted. That evening I spent 2 hours on the privy floor with a bucket and Marwent's knife between my teeth because assassination had become preferable to digestion. Darrow sat outside the door and reported who came to see whether I had died. Mina came last. "The ration clerks altered the receiving seals," she said. "Sabotage?" "The seals were altered after the carts arrived. They wanted the loss entered against transit instead of storage. Cowardice, not treason." "Then flog them." "The yard wants thieves. You promised hidden food had an officer attached. There was no hidden food." I understood. A crowd accepts shared suffering only if someone is guilty of avoiding it. We had given them equality. They wanted explanation. 3 ration clerks were hanged at first bell. Mina planted jars of preserved cherries beneath their bunks and wrote confessions in 3 different hands. One clerk had 2 daughters. Another had served 20 years without stealing anything larger than lamp oil. The third cursed me until the rope took his voice. The lower yard applauded. I watched from the Admiralty steps. Marwent lay under the third one, where his blood had dried into the limestone weeks before. I wondered whether the dead recognize imitation. Darrow did not ask if they were guilty. That made it worse. Afterward, the butcher priest requested compensation for spoiled cargo. I had him fed a bowl from the condemned vat. He pronounced it excellent after 2 bites and died before midnight. Beelzebub accepted the returned bowl as settlement. For 2 days, order held. Men joked about green stew. Mina issued lemon water against flux, following the old naval wisdom that citrus kept a garrison alive even when its surgeons could not say why. Kiev coated tools in grease because the damp was blooming orange rust overnight. Olt made rounds of the eastern face and returned with macaque hair on his sleeve. On the third night, a cargo ship obeyed Gibraltar's lighthouse and sailed onto a reef. The lighthouse had shown no signal. The reef our pilots called Pearl Rock lay southwest of the harbor entrance, close enough to punish a navigator and far enough to embarrass the guns. It appeared on no surviving Christian chart under that name. At low water, it showed a black back under the waves. At high water, it waited. Navigation through the strait was never a matter of pointing west. Atlantic water entered at the surface, while heavier Mediterranean water moved beneath it in the opposite direction. Wind, tide, and hidden current argued around Europa Point, setting a ship sideways even when its compass held true. Gibraltar's pilots learned the color of disturbed water, the smell of Africa on a southerly gust, and the interval between a foghorn and its echo from the rock. Captains who trusted charts alone became names attached to wrecks. The supply vessel Magnificent Hunger struck it at 4 bells before dawn. She carried coal, machine oil, flour, 6 crates of replacement lenses, and a naval inspector whose report later blamed the reef for occupying an unauthorized position. Her bow opened below the waterline. The harbor tugs reached her before she sank, but every swell drove her farther onto the stone. I went out aboard a steam launch with Kiev and 20 men. The Levanter had filled the western bay by then. It moved in torn bands, hiding the rock, revealing a battery, hiding it again. The fog tasted salty, although the wind came across open water. Sound behaved badly. Tug whistles arrived from the wrong side. Hammers aboard the wreck seemed to ring inside our hull. Captain Dravis met us on the tilting deck. He was barefoot and furious, his uniform trousers rolled above his knees. "Your summit station showed 3 green, 1 white," he said. "Safe Western Channel." "The summit station has been blind for 3 days. Then your blindness has lamps." His helmsman and 2 lookouts repeated the signal under separate questioning. 3 green flashes, 1 white, then a low red light leading them south. The sequence belonged to Moloch Harbor Control. The red light belonged to no published station. We salvaged what we could before the tide. Flour sacks became paste. Oil drums floated free and were claimed by mammon boats before touching shore. The naval inspector remained in his cabin drafting corrections while water rose around his knees. Darrow left him there until the man amended the report to include our assistance. At the summit mirror room, Adept Selka received us behind a silver mask made to resemble a face more beautiful than hers had been. The chamber contained heliograph mirrors for daylight, colored shutters for night, speaking tubes, arc lamps, and code wheels etched with infernal numerals. In clear weather, signals passed from summit to harbor and across the strait in seconds. In cloud, the station could barely see its own balcony. "No lamp was lit," Selka said. "A ship saw one. Ships see saints, islands, and sobriety. None survives inspection." Kiev opened the green shutter assembly. Salt water ran over his wrist. The chamber fell quiet. The mechanism had been sealed since maintenance 2 weeks earlier. Its screws bore Moloch wax. Inside, the brass stops carried fine scratches. Someone had repeatedly adjusted the mirror 2 degrees east, then returned it to position. Not enough to misdirect an ordinary signal, enough to aim it at a vessel waiting beyond Europa Point. Selka accused her deputy. Her deputy accused the dead adept Ilvarin, whom I had used against Marwent. 3 clerks accused Weather. Weather could not be tortured, so it remained the preferred suspect. I seeded 5 false schedules. Each was dictated in a different office beside a speaking tube or service pipe. Mammon was told water lighters would depart at dusk. Abaddon heard of an ammunition transfer at midnight. Beelzebub received notice of a dawn meat convoy. Moloch was ordered to expect a submarine at second bell. Eligos officers were told the main lift would close for maintenance. At dusk, smugglers waited for the water lighters. At midnight, Abaddon raiders ambushed an empty tram. At dawn, hungry wretched crowded the north gate. At second bell, Spanish guns fired ranging shots into the submarine channel. At noon, the main lift received a sabotage alarm for maintenance that had never begun. Every falsehood had escaped. 5 traitors? Dero asked. Or 1 listener, Kiev said. No wire joins all 5 offices. The Rock joins them. That answer sounded clever. Gibraltar punishes clever answers until they become useful. We searched ducts, service tunnels, message boxes, and forgotten speaking tubes. Old found wire wrapped around a rainwater downpipe on the eastern face. It led upward into cloud and ended cleanly cut. Mina found fish scattered on a high parade terrace after a night with no rain. Each fish carried a strip of prayer parchment in its belly. Greek words had bled into the flesh. Sorrel proposed a general arrest of Christian-born laborers. 1 in 20 will know something. The others will improve discipline. And stop the work? Fear is productive. For short shifts. I refused, partly because I needed the labor and partly because Sorrel had made the purge sound too easy. That night I stood above Dock 3 while the cloud erased the sea. Somewhere beyond it, a bell rang. Not a ship's bell. A deep bronze note, repeated from under the water. Every man on the gantry heard it. Every man pretended he had not. Then red rain began falling inside the galleries. The first drops appeared on the roof of Powder Magazine 4. They were not blood. Mina tasted one before I could stop her and pronounced it limestone water carrying iron from the galleries above. That comforted no one. Blood has rules. Water coming through 600 feet of rock does not. The Levanter pressed wet air into every crack on the eastern face. Gibraltar's limestone cooled it. Condensation formed on gun barrels, electrical contacts, chapel icons, and sleeping men's teeth. It ran down whitewashed walls in red threads wherever rust lived behind plaster. Within hours, the lower tunnels looked wounded. Powder hates moisture more purely than men hate enemies. Black powder clumped. Primers softened. Paper cartridges peeled apart. Cordite sweated oily crystals that burned the hands. The eastern batteries sent down sample charges that flared weakly and died, leaving brown snakes of residue. Mina found dry ammunition on sale before the official stores admitted a problem. The market operated in a disused chapel beneath the line wall. Soldiers entered through the old confessional, paid in ducats or teeth, and left with cartridges wrapped in sailcloth. The altar held crates marked condemned after the battle for Dock 3. Their seals were ours. Lieutenant Sorrel waited beside them. Darrow raised his rifle. Sorrel did not move. "Commander," he said, "I wondered how long your quartermaster would take. You stole my powder. I preserved powder that your offices would have issued before the damp, and sold it back to my men, at a price high enough to prevent waste." He had begun moving ammunition the day the Levanter arrived, not because he created the weather or knew the enemy plan. He had watched cloud gather, inspected storage habits, and prepared to profit from failure. That was almost worse. A traitor may be discovered. A survivor looks like wisdom after everyone else is dead. Darrow wanted him shot in the chapel. Mina wanted the location of his other stores first. I wanted both. Command wanted dry powder. At dawn, I appointed Lieutenant Sorrel emergency master of ammunition. The order praised his foresight and granted authority over all storage transfers. It also placed every crate he had hidden into official inventory and made him personally liable for shortages. Sorrel bowed. "A generous sentence," he said. "It has not ended." He issued dry cartridges by unit, heated air in guarded furnace rooms, and drove it through ducts into the wet magazines and set laborers turning barrels so damp would not settle along one side. The eastern guns remained weak, but they could fire. Men who had cursed him in the market now saluted him at the stores. The dreams began that night. 14 men in separate barracks dreamed of bells beneath the sea. 7 woke with salt on their lips. One loader walked in his sleep from the North Magazine to an obsolete call panel and rang 3 short, 2 long, 1 short before Darrow broke his wrist. The man swore someone had given him the order in my voice. I had him confined. By breakfast, 2 more had heard me whispering from drains. By noon, Kiv refused to enter a speaking tube room alone because he heard his mother reciting machinery settings from inside the wall. His mother had been dead 12 years and had never understood machinery. Olt alone slept well. "What do you dream?" I asked. "Cliffs. And bells?" "Cliffs ring if you strike the proper part." He showed me 3 brass filings caught in his sleeve and a strip of macaque hair tied around his wrist. "They are coming down," he said. "Who?" Above us, something crashed in the officer's kitchen. A cook screamed. Then the summit apes descended into Gibraltar like an army abandoning heaven. The Barbary macaques had lived on the upper rock longer than any regiment and behaved as if every regiment owed rent. No one agreed who first brought them. Some said Moors carried them across the strait. Some said they crossed on wreckage after an African city drowned. The garrison legend was older than every officer. Gibraltar would remain held while the apes remained. Christendom had counted them. Hell counted them more carefully. Mammon maintained the official register because superstition becomes property whenever greed can number it. 43 animals received a daily fruit allowance superior to the ration of a wretched gun porter. Moloch observed their movements for omens. Beelzebub offered high prices for corpses and denied culinary intent. Officers mocked the legend in public and checked the morning count in private. All 43 came down within an hour. They poured from the cloud along cables, parapets, drainpipes, and gun embrasures. They raided kitchens, chapels, and barrack rooms. One stole Sorrel's rank tabs and ate half of one before he recovered it. Another opened a cage of signal pigeons, killed none, and climbed inside as though seeking transport. A large male entered the Admiralty office, bared his teeth at Marwan's portrait, and defecated on the command ledger. Darrow proposed promoting him. Then men began shooting. An Abaddon corporal killed a juvenile for taking his ear. Mammon demanded restitution for state property. Moloch declared the dead ape the 7th warning of the uncrowned beast. Beelzebub's porters tried to purchase the body before it cooled. Within 20 minutes, 3 factions had drawn weapons over an animal none admitted fearing. I ordered the macaques collected alive. Darrow deployed fishing nets. Kiev baited cages with officers' peaches. Mina set a bounty of 1 cup of clean water per animal and created a black market before noon. Wretched boys began stealing captured macaques from one another to claim the reward twice. Olt caught none. He watched where they went. In a disused telegraph room, we found a female with prayer parchment wrapped around her wrist. The text was Greek, written so small Mina needed a lens. It was not a message. It was a portion of the Beatitudes, altered so the meek inherited only ash. Another macaque had brass filings in its fur and tar on its palms. A third carried a length of copper thread bitten from an artillery witch's stitches. Every object came from a restricted summit station. "Couriers," Mina said. "Christian agents trained them." "They carried nothing up," Olt replied. "They brought things down." "Warnings?" "Evidence." The summit count station failed to answer. Its telephone emitted breathing. The east stair disappeared into cloud after the 20th step. Olt tied a coil of climbing rope around his waist. The upper rock was riddled with stations that had outlived the armies which named them. Gun platforms became lookouts. Lookouts became stores. Stores became shrines after someone died badly inside. Paths doubled back between limestone pinnacles and old defensive walls. On clear days, Africa appeared close enough to shell and Spain close enough to hate by name. In the Levanter, a sentry could lose the parapet while keeping one hand upon it. White vapor erased distance. Gulls flying through it seemed to appear already dead before their wings found motion. "I will go alone." "No." He looked at me with mild surprise. I had never forbidden him a dangerous route before. "Take 6 men," I said. 6 men sound like 6 men. That is generally the purpose. Up there it may be the problem." He waited. I remembered the lift shaft and the mistake command had already made of caution. "Go," I said. "Report every quarter bell." Olt climbed the old Mediterranean steps cut into the southeastern cliff. The route had served sentries, smugglers, and invaders depending on which history owned the map. His voice came through the field telephone at the first landing, then the second. At the third, he reported bronze scraped across stone and a smell of incense. "Cloud moving against wind," he said. "Explain." "Cannot. Someone is—" The line went taut, then slack. Darrow and I hauled it in. The end had been cut with a sharp blade. Olt's blood marked 3 feet of rope. His body did not come with it. I refused to pronounce him dead. For 2 days I sent patrols toward the summit. One returned without its officer. Another emerged on the western slope convinced it had climbed downward the entire time. A third found a chapel whose door opened onto the cliff, although maps placed the room 40 yards inside the rock. The macaques would not go back. They slept in the lower yards, packed together under machinery, and screamed whenever the morning shift bells began. On the third evening, men in Gallery 12 heard movement in the cloud. They carried flamethrowers. The anointed patrol belonged to Abaddon and had been sent to protect the eastern magazine approaches. Its commander was Brother Kaldor, a man sealed inside devotional plate with twin fuel cylinders across his back. He believed caution was a Christian defect. Gallery 12 curved around the eastern face behind embrasures cut for obsolete cannon. Barracks occupied the inner wall. 213 soldiers slept there. Eligos mechanics, wrath loaders, mammon guards, and a company of wretched whose names existed only on meal tallies. Beyond them lay the main powder transit, protected by iron blast doors. At 19 minutes after evening bell, Calder heard marching beyond the 6th embrasure. There was no ledge outside. The Levanter filled the opening like wool. Men heard boots approaching through it, hundreds in cadence, although the cliff fell sheer to the Mediterranean. Calder challenged. A voice answered with his childhood name. He fired. Flame entered cloud and returned along the ceiling. Condensed oil from machine vents had coated the gallery stone. The mist itself seemed to catch. Fire ran above the patrol, down the walls, through bedding, and into the barracks before anyone understood that the attack came from their own weapon. The alarm reached Dock 3 as one continuous bell. We climbed through smoke until heat peeled paint from the pipes. Men crowded behind the eastern blast door, beating it with tools. The manual wheel had warped. Kiev could open it from our side by releasing the counterweight. Behind the western door lay Magazine 5. "Open east and the fire draws through," Kiev said. "Like a furnace. It reaches the transit. Can we flood the gallery?" "Cistern is low. Pipes are steam service, not water." "How long before the powder?" Mina looked at the heat gauge. "Less time than prayer." Darrow could hear his men beyond the door. 26 blue sash mechanics were quartered there. He knew each voice. Trooper Fenn kept shouting that his child was asleep in the corner. Sergeant Halvek ordered the others to stand back from the door, then begged us to ignore his own order. "Open it," Darrow said. "The magazine goes. Then flood the magazine." "With what?" "The officer's cistern. Mammon reserve. Blood. I don't care." There was not enough. Government becomes simple when arithmetic removes mercy. I closed the western blast door as well. Darrow struck me. He had struck enemies, subordinates, machinery, and once a horse that refused an infernal brand. He had never struck me. His fist opened the scar on my shoulder where Marwent's sword had cut. "Cassian." My name was the last argument he possessed. "Seal it," I said. Kiev dropped the locking bar. The voices continued for 8 minutes. Fire changed them one by one. When silence came, the temperature gauge kept rising. We vented steam into the approach and packed wet sailcloth around the magazine joints. On the far side, ammunition crews rolled powder deeper into the rock. Sorrell moved his dry reserve without waiting for orders. At 23 minutes, the gauge began to fall. 213 died in Gallery 12. We recovered 90 bodies after the stone cooled. The rest had become part of the walls. Brother Calder survived because anointed plate preserved the man who started the fire. Abaddon demanded his return. I delivered him without fuel cylinders and with the names of the dead stamped into his armor. Wrath praised him for refusing retreat. At the memorial, Darrow stood beside me. He called me Commander, not Cassian, not Vey. Their sister companies volunteer for East Battery duty, he said. They should rest. They want a target. We do not know the target. Then find one, Commander. After he left, Sorrel gave me the casualty abstract. It valued the lost mechanics, docked the wretched for destroyed bedding, and listed the ammunition saved. You made the necessary decision, he said. I nearly killed him for offering comfort. That night, the Levanter thinned for 6 minutes. Searchlights caught no enemy on the eastern sea. Instead, a fishing net rose from the harbor carrying a dead man in Greek uniform. His body contained the first honest map of our disaster. The corpse had no water in its stomach and cloud water in its lungs. Dr. Sarn demonstrated the difference by pouring both into glass jars. Seawater settled clear above grains of sand. The fluid from the lungs remained milky and gave off a faint electrical light when shaken. He drowned in air, Sarn said. Can air do that? It did. Medicine is often the discipline of arriving after facts. The dead man wore the leather coat of a Greek naval reconnaissance officer. His fingernails had been removed. Behind the left shoulder blade, Mina found stitches too neat for torture. She opened them and drew out oiled linen. The map showed Gibraltar in layers, but not as our defense plans showed it. Batteries were absent. Armor thicknesses were ignored. Instead, there were lines for kitchen smoke, condenser pulses, shift bells, lift cycles, sewage flows, workshop hammers, tram vibration, and ration queues. Small annotations marked the exact times each system changed after a crisis. Condenser 6, steam diverted. Western ammunition lift, response in 11 minutes. Spoiled convoy, lower yard concentration in 43 minutes. False harbor signal, tug mobilization in 9 minutes. Powder damp, reserves transferred through Chapel 3. Gallery 12. Blast doors closed, Magazine 5 protected. The Greeks had not needed to sabotage every system. Their prayers and instruments had raised the unnatural Levanter and held it against the rock. They planted a few probes, the false harbor light, the prayer fish, the obsolete lift signal, then listened while damp, hunger, Sorrel, and our own rivalries did the rest. Gibraltar sabotaged itself for them. Kiev laid the map beside a survey of the limestone. The cloud carries sound, more than sound. Pressure, heat, vibration. The rock conducts what the air catches. He took us to the condenser hall. With the machinery stopped, he pressed his ear to the main pipe and told Darrow to strike a handrail 3 galleries away. The blow came through as a low note. Kiev shifted a valve and it changed pitch. Every pipe is an instrument, he said. Every gallery a sounding box. Their ships sit east of the rock with receivers. They hear our pumps and know the cistern level. They hear the lifts and count shells. They hear shift bells and know when crews change. The prayer parchments? Mina asked. Markers, tests. Perhaps the Greeks use recitation to shape the mist. Moloch uses geometry for signals. Why not prayer for weather? He hated that answer because it made machinery depend upon belief. The partial map placed 3 listening vessels beyond the eastern haze and a command craft beneath Europa Point. It marked an attack on the next morning shift when exhausted crews replaced one another. The eastern batteries were circled. Their powder had suffered most. Gallery 12 had removed the reserve barracks. Our best guns faced west because every sensible admiral expected attack through the bay. Sorrel recommended immediate bombardment into the cloud. At what? Everything. With damp powder and barrels they are counting. Mina recommended evacuation of eastern magazines. That was exactly what the map expected. Darrow wanted the sister companies moved forward. Kiev wanted every machine stopped, an impossibility unless 11,000 mouths agreed not to breathe. I looked at the map and understood the true problem. The enemy believed Gibraltar was a machine. Eligos taught the same belief. Machines followed systems. Systems revealed purpose. A piston could not pretend to break. A lift could not stage cowardice. A fortress under pressure exposed truth through its responses. Men could lie. The senior commanders gathered in the old cable chamber because none would enter another faction's headquarters. Abaddon demanded the eastern defense. Moloch demanded the signals. Mammon demanded payment before either moved. They rejected one another until Mina laid the lift schedules, water mains, and ammunition routes on the table. All crossed Dock 3. They granted me emergency coordination of the eastern works until the attack ended. Abaddon kept its guns, Moloch its mirrors, and Mammon its invoices. I received authority to tell them when to move. Each commander signed because each expected me to fail before the ink dried. "We give them one more test," I said. "Of what?" Darrow asked. "Everything." I ordered the eastern works to collapse. Fortresses advertise strength because strength discourages attack. Gibraltar had displayed strength for 2.5 centuries, guns along the ridge, ships behind chains, signal mirrors flashing from the summit, labor moving with the confidence of machinery. Even our factional murders observed schedules. To appear weak required discipline. At first bell, Mina cut the lower ration by half and leaked an inventory showing 3 empty grain vaults. The vaults were full of dry powder under sacks of weevil meal. Beelzebub inspectors smelled food and discovered none. They abandoned their kitchens to protect private stores farther west. At second bell, Mammon received notice that the officer's cistern had cracked. Kiev placed hammers inside an empty tank and made the sound travel through water pipes. Factor Orson heard the groaning metal, closed his eastern counting houses, and began moving gold toward the harbor tunnels. At third bell, Moloch's summit station transmitted an evacuation order in a code old enough to seem accidentally authentic. Adept Selka publicly denounced it. Her deputy publicly denounced her denunciation. Both performances were genuine by the end. At fourth bell, Darrow arrested 3 officers in the ration yard and staged an execution. The rifles held blank cartridges, but one officer had not been told. His terror gave the scene conviction. We let him escape toward Sorel's office. Sorel watched every development with admiration. "You assume I will sell the evacuation plan," he said when I placed it on my desk and left him alone with it. "I assume you will inspect a document important enough to conceal badly. And if I remain loyal, then you will understand why I am disappointed." The plan ordered remaining command staff to withdraw aboard the launch Pride of Ceuta at morning bell. It listed the eastern magazines as abandoned, the west cistern as command's last water, and Dock 3 as the assembly point. Every detail was false except the launch. Within an hour, a shutter flashed from an unregistered casemate. Kiv's acoustic gauge heard the reply pass through the cloud. Sorel had sold it. I did not arrest him. A traitor is a speaking tube. You do not smash the tube before the message finishes. Behind the performance, the eastern works rearranged themselves. Mina moved dry powder through sewage galleries built by British engineers and enlarged by prisoners. Carts could not enter, so men passed cartridge boxes hand to hand through tunnels where waste reached their waists. Every box emerged stinking but dry. Men laughed at the choice between filth and burning. Soldiers prefer dangers that can be mocked. Kiev ran acoustic branches from the condenser pipes into empty casemates. He mounted hammer wheels inside, crude devices that struck pipe as steam turned them. One working battery would sound like 6. A stopped lift would continue ringing in the enemy's map. The repaired condenser would labor at full rhythm while producing no water, broadcasting an illusion of reserve. He also coupled the boiler fans to old forced draft galleries on the eastern face. If overdriven, they could throw furnace-hot, comparatively dry air through the vents. Once, Darrow took the sister companies of Gallery 12 East. They painted rust on serviceable gun shields and stretched burned canvas over hidden embrasures. The artillery witch, Illyra Ven, chose firing positions by listening to shells rolled across the floor. She had replaced the copper stitches in her lips with red wire. Each time she smiled, blood proved the future still had a price. We filled abandoned magazines with coal dust, scrap iron, and small charges. From the sea they would burst like powder stores. We left disabled guns in open positions and concealed working pieces behind rubble screens. Men carried empty ration crates west in daylight and full ammunition boxes east after dark. The performance infected those not told the truth. Wretched laborers rioted for real when the false ration cut reached them. Mammon guards fired. Beelzebub porters looted a chapel. Moloch adepts killed one another over codes we had invented. Every lie used to deceive the enemy became suffering inside our walls. "Stop the ration cut," Darrow said. "The listening craft will hear the kitchens resume. Then let them hear. They must believe. Our men already do." He called me commander again. At dusk, Factor Orsin offered to sell evacuation berths on Mammon lighters. At midnight, Beelzebub began boiling prisoners into portable ration fat. I had the kettles overturned and the priests locked inside their own cold rooms. That mercy cost us noise. Kiev compensated by breaking crockery beside a speaking pipe. The rock sounded sick. Bells, mistimed shifts. Hammers stopped. Pumps coughed. Officers shouted contradictory orders in galleries where cloud pressed through gun ports. Far to the east, unseen listeners drew conclusions. Near midnight, Olt returned. He walked into Dock 3 barefoot, burned and half-deaf, carrying a bronze ear. No one saw where he came from. One moment the dock gate was empty. The next, Olt stood beneath it, white mist rolling from his coat. The right side of his face was blistered. Blood had dried from both ears. Around his waist hung the cut end of our rope, retied with a knot no Gibraltar climber used. Darrow embraced him, then struck him for being alive without permission. Olt accepted both. The bronze object he carried had the shape of a human ear, enlarged 10 times. Fine Greek prayers ran around its rim. Inside, membranes of beaten skin stretched across silver forks. When Kiev touched one, a shift bell answered from a pipe 50 yards away. "Listening horn," Olt said. His own voice came too loud. "They had 7 along the summit, more on boats below." He had climbed above the cloud layer and found moonlight. The summit ridge became an island in white sea. At the old observation station, Greek adepts had fixed bronze horns into cracks in the rock. Captive choir boys knelt between them, reciting prayers in interlocking cycles. Their voices shaped pressure inside the cloud. Signal light entered one horn and emerged elsewhere as sound. Hammer blows became images in bowls of milk. When Gibraltar changed routine, the adepts adjusted their map. "How many soldiers?" I asked. "Few. Scouts. Spanish uniforms beneath Greek coats. They used the old Mediterranean stair and a cave below the ridge." "Why did they keep you alive?" "They did not." Olt had cut one choir boy free during shift change. The boy showed him a drainage shaft leading into the old Moorish galleries. They descended while Greek guards fired into cloud. The boy died when a prayer horn burst. Olt walked for 2 days inside the rock, following bells. "Inside?" He nodded. "The summit is hollow in places not on our plans. Old siege works, older cisterns, steps worn before the Moors. The bells came through stone." "From the Greek horns?" "No." He placed the bronze ear on Kiev's workbench. Its membrane trembled, although every nearby machine was still. "The Greeks were listening to us," Olt said. "Something listened to them. It repeated orders before officers spoke, told guards where I would climb before I chose the route. The choir heard it. They thought it was a saint beneath the mountain. Their officer thought it was interference." "What do you think?" Mina asked. "I think it knows every bell Gibraltar has rung since stone learned sound." None of us liked that. A Christian spy could be shot. A Greek machine could be broken. An intelligence living in limestone required paperwork beyond my authority. Olt gave us the attack time. Morning shift bell. Spanish torpedo launches and Greek armored craft would approach through cloud. A reconnaissance vessel off Europa Point would coordinate fire using the summit horns. The first bombardment would strike the abandoned eastern guns. Assault parties would enter through Gallery 12's shattered embrasures. We had 5 hours. "Change the bell," Mina said. "Advance shift." "No," I replied. If we silenced or moved it, the enemy would know Olt had returned. The performance would fail. Our men would advance toward guns in darkness at the same moment the enemy adjusted. "The bell rings as always." Darrow stared at me. "The sister companies are beneath it. They know." "Do they know you knew?" There was no answer that preserved us both. I ordered Olt to the infirmary. He ignored me and took position at the eastern observation ledge, beside the signal cable that descended to Gallery 12. Kiv mounted the bronze ear to our acoustic pipes. Mina made final ammunition counts. Darrow walked the east positions and spoke to every crew without me. Sorel disappeared 1 hour before dawn. The Pride of Cuta left its berth without clearance and headed south along the coast. I let it go. The Levanter lay thick over the sea. No stars showed. The rocks sweated red water. In the lower yard, macaques huddled beneath the silent lift and watched the east. Then the morning shift bell rang, once, twice. On the third stroke, the sea opened fire. The first shells struck batteries we had already abandoned. Stone and canvas rose together. A dummy magazine beneath Middle Hill exploded with enough coal dust to paint the cloud black. The enemy guns shifted immediately, searching for secondary blasts. Our acoustic pipes hammered panic through the rock, lifts racing west, ammunition carts retreating, condenser engines failing. Spanish launches emerged below the eastern cliff, narrow bows cutting mist. Behind them came Greek armored craft with low turrets and crosses painted along their waterlines. Choir voices traveled ahead of them. Every embrasure repeated the hymn a fraction later until the rock seemed full of children praying from sealed rooms. The enemy command vessel held farther south, using our escaped launch as guide. Sorel stood at the wheel of the Pride of Cuta. He had brought the false evacuation map, 3 chests of dry ammunition, and 12 men. He signaled the reconnaissance vessel with a lamp. 3 green flashes, 1 white, the light that killed the magnificent hunger. "Range?" Darrow asked. Illyra Ven tilted her head. Blood ran from her red stitches. "Not yet," she sang. Assault parties climbed from the launches onto ledges below Gallery 12. Their grapnels found the iron rings our engineers had left visible. Men in Spanish plate ascended through cloud, shields above their heads, expecting burned survivors and wet powder. We let the first company climb inside. Canvas fell from the sister company's guns. Mina opened the sewage gallery magazines. Dry cartridges moved to loaders. Kiv engaged the hammer wheels. 1 battery became 6 in the pipes. The eastern face fired. At close range, fortress guns do not sound like thunder. Thunder rolls away. Guns inside limestone strike body and stone together. The first salvo tore 3 launches apart and threw climbers from ropes. Illyra's shell passed through the lead Greek turret, skipped from the sea, and burst beneath the vessel behind it. She laughed because she had seen both impacts and liked the second better. Enemy observers heard batteries where none existed. They shifted fire toward Kiv's decoys. Shells smashed empty galleries. Scrap magazines burst convincingly. Guns hauled from the Western Reserve fired again from east-facing casemates, reached along internal traverses old engineers had cut for threats no current map remembered. The assault company inside Gallery 12 found Darrow waiting. He fought with the survivors' sister units among the shapes burned into walls. Rifles fired from behind blast doors. Wretched laborers rolled condemned shells down the slope as mines. Men who had cursed my ration cuts defended kitchens with cleavers. Gibraltar did not become united. It became briefly aligned by someone else trying to own it. The cloud still protected the command vessel. Its listening horns corrected fire after every salvo. We could hear the Greek officer's orders in the bronze ear mounted to Kiv's pipes. "Now," Kiv said. Mina opened the forced draft gates. Kiv oversped the boiler fans and drove furnace-hot, comparatively dry air through the eastern galleries. It struck the saturated cloud as a violent local updraft. The Levanter did not clear. A narrow corridor tore through it for less than a minute. It was enough. Sunlight struck the sea. The Greek command vessel appeared off Europa Point, crowded with bronze horns and robed adepts. Beside it ran Sorel's launch. I saw him raise one hand against the glare. Darrow had returned to Illyra's battery with blood down his uniform. He took the firing lanyard from a dead loader. "Commander!" He asked for the order. "Not Cassian." I gave it. Illyra sang. Darrow pulled. The shell struck the Pride of Cuta beneath its boiler. Sorel and his men became steam, planks, and burning ammunition. The blast lifted the launch against the Greek vessel's side. A second shell entered through the gap. Bronze listening horns spun into the air like severed ears. The command ship rolled. Choir boys leapt into water. From the eastern observation ledge, Olt went down the signal cable and hauled two onto the rock. Darrow saw him and swore, but did not stop firing. Without correction, enemy shells wandered. One Spanish launch reversed into another. Greek craft turned south, firing blind into cloud that had begun descending again. Our guns followed until wet charges produced more smoke than shot. Then, Condenser 6 ruptured. The fan's overload raced back through the coupled drive and oversped Condenser 6. The sleeve Kiv had made split. A piston rod crossed the machine hall and killed 9 men. The clear tank burst into the drains. Draft pressure vanished. The Levanter closed over the sea once more, hiding the retreating fleet. We had won. Gibraltar had less than 2 days of water. The cloud lifted at noon. It did not tear or dissolve. It rose from the summit like a sheet pulled by an invisible hand and streamed west over the Atlantic. Sunlight revealed broken batteries, burned galleries, wrecked launches, and bodies caught on the eastern rocks. The sea was painfully blue. Gibraltar's commanders assembled beneath the bronze relief on the Admiralty steps. Marwent remained buried beneath them. They ended my emergency authority before presenting their bills. Mammon charged for water lost during unauthorized atmospheric expenditure. Beelzebub demanded compensation for abandoned kitchens. Abaddon claimed sole credit for the defense because Brother Calder's fire had prepared Gallery 12. Moloch declared that the false signals proved the necessity of granting it control over all signals. Eligos praised me for saving the rock and requested an accounting of shells. Victory is the interval between battle and invoices. Factor Orsine brought the same lacquered case. The spare condenser lining rested inside. His new contract granted Mammon permanent control of Dock 3, its water output, repair berths, and 3 generations of labor rights over the families housed beneath it. "Sign," he said, "and drinking issue resumes before evening." Mina's inventory showed 1 day and 17 hours at half ration, less if the heat rose. The nearest convoy remained trapped at Ceuta. Kiev could patch the piston, but not before the clear tank emptied. Men were already gathering at the cistern gates. "Open the officer's reserve," I said. Mina looked at me. "That belongs to command." "I am command." The sealed officer's cistern lay behind Marwent's private quarters. It dated from a British siege, lined with hard cement and fed by catchments cut into the western slope. Captains had protected it through bombardments, mutinies, and famines. Its water was cool, almost sweet, and held enough for the lower yards for 3 days. Almost. Sounding rods found silt in the bottom and cracks along the northern wall. We had 1 day of water, perhaps a little more. I ordered Mina to conceal the sounding marks. We opened the gates at evening bell. Wretched laborers drank first. Blue sash troopers filled cups for families. Darrow stood beside the valve and prevented officers from advancing the line. Men who had watched the ration clerks hang cheered my name. They believed I had saved water for them. In truth, Marwent had hoarded it for himself, and I had spent it because no other coin remained. It was mercy and politics joined in a lie that would survive until the taps coughed dry. Factor Orsin closed his lacquered case. "You will return tomorrow. Tomorrow I may own one of your cisterns." "With what army?" I looked at the men drinking beneath blue sashes, at Abaddon weapons captured from the eastern assault, at Mina's ledgers and Kiv's working pumps. "One that is thirsty." Mammon guards doubled at every counting grate that night. I walked the rock after midnight. Gallery 12 remained sealed. The lower yards slept beside water tins. Kiv had begun drawing a new condenser piston from submarine parts. Mina listed targets for a raid. A greed cistern, a Beelzebub convoy, a Christian rain depot across the strait. Olt kept the 2 rescued choir boys in an old signal room and taught them which bells meant food. Darrow found me on the east parapet. "Is the rock saved?" he asked. The Spanish coast showed watchfires. Beyond it waited armies, cities, farms, and reservoirs. Behind us lay the Atlantic routes hell had taken Gibraltar to control. Under our boots, 11,000 mouths slept because they believed morning contained water. No fortress is saved, I said. It is only fed for one more day. Darrow considered that. Cassian. It was the first time he had used my name since the fire. Then he left me alone. Near dawn, the Levanter returned. Not the great white tablecloth of the siege, only a thin pennant streaming from the summit, pale against the stars. The macaques woke together. They looked upward. Olt came onto the parapet with the bronze listening ear tucked beneath one arm. He placed it against the limestone. For a long moment, nothing moved except cloud. Then the morning shift bell rang once from inside solid stone. No living hand had touched it. The sound traveled downward through old siege galleries, Moorish cisterns, Christian tunnels, and chambers cut before any of them. Every pipe in Gibraltar whispered the note. Condenser 6 answered with a dead piston stroke. The western ammunition lift rang 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. Olt pulled the bronze ear away. The stretched membrane whispered a fragment in my voice. "At morning bell." And it knew my voice.